The quarterly inflation number tomorrow is the last piece of the puzzle for the Reserve Bank before its rates decision next week. Annual inflation to the end of March was 7%. This time it's tipped to be 6.2%, but higher than the monthly indicator of 5.6% that was through to the end of May. So what number will tip the RBA's hand and what will stay it? Warren Hogan is an independent economist and an advisor to the small business lender Judo Bank and joins me now. Warren, thanks for your time. What's your gut feel about this inflation number tomorrow? What really moves the dial for the Reserve Bank?
Well, I think the number is got to really surprise on the downside, Ross. Markets expecting a quarterly increase of around 1 for both core and headline, which gives you that 6% annual rate. But I think last week's really strong employment report is the key for the RBA next week. So I think the report tomorrow needs to come in materially weaker than expected to have them second guessing their inflation forecast and holding off on a rate hike, even though employment has been so strong.
OK, so then there's a few other bits and pieces. We heard this afternoon also that the Reserve Bank has put out its agenda for when it will be meeting under the new structure it's got next year. Now, we know that there's going to be 8 meetings a year. Does this really make much difference in terms of people watching the Reserve Bank and its rate moves, or is really not much difference at all?
Oh, no, it'll make a big difference to the Australian market and also to our monetary policy makers because they're not going to get as many opportunities to move the cash rate. So that was why we only ever did 50s last year. We pivoted to 25s, whereas other central banks were doing 75s and pivoting down to 50s and 25s. So, look, I think it's going to put a lot more emphasis on the meeting, and, of course, there'll be a bigger risk of a bigger move, and that is going to be an adjustment for the Aussie market.
Yeah, we just saw there won't be one in April, there won't be one in July, there won't be one in October, there won't be one in January. So that's a big difference, there's no doubt. And just tell me, I mean, in regards to the decision-making right now, the Governor, Philip Lowe, is outgoing. Michelle Bullock coming in as the Deputy Governor. Do you think even at this meeting it makes any change to the dynamics or in the way in which they'll make any decisions?
Look, I think it does at the margin. We know that when Phil Lowe took over, he had, I think it was 10 or 11 months of no rate changes before he actually did a cut, I believe. And I think that's the sort of thing an exiting governor would like to leave a new governor, a clear pathway, a policy rate that's appropriately set. And I think in this circumstance, that's not a 4.1% cash rate, especially after those strong employment numbers. Tomorrow, the CPI will probably confirm still way too high inflation, well below, cash rate well below that inflation rate. So I think the dynamic now is that Governor Lowe wants to hand over the reins of the cash rate to Michelle Bullock with a 4.35% cash rate, if not a little bit higher, depending on what the data does tomorrow and over the next 6 weeks.
Well, it certainly would make her job potentially a lot easier when there's a lot of structural change to take place at the Reserve Bank, to really not have to be spending every living minute talking or breathing about the next interest rate move, if indeed much of the work was already done by this existing board.
Well, I think the most important thing is that for the new governor to come in this environment with the media attention, the political attention, and have to hike rates 2 or 3 times in her first 3 or 4 meetings, I think is a recipe for disaster. I think giving her a chance to do some speeches, not move rates for a few months, is ideal. I think that's the way it's going to play out because I think they will go next week. I think then they have the breathing space to sit back and watch. The reality is that whether our cash rate needs to go up above 5 or not, i.e. to where the global interest rate is, the US interest rate, I don't think we're going to know until later in the year or early next year. So I think another rate hike, that will give Michelle Bullock some breathing space and make Phil Lowe happy.
But the one thing that's quite clear is that inflation, the interest rate rise we've seen so far, have not broken the back of inflation.
No, they haven't. And inflation's coming down, that's fine, but it's going to be measured in core terms at 6% tomorrow. And the thing that I think makes tomorrow's number a little bit redundant, not entirely, but a little bit, is that 1 July is the key day for prices in this economy. It's the start of the new financial year. There's a whole range of administered prices that go up. And of course, we've heard a range of anecdotes of private sector prices from insurance and logistics and transport going up. What happens to Australian inflation in the month of July is critical. We saw in the Judo Bank PMIs that all the input price indicators went up this month in our flash release. So I actually think it's that July CPI which is critical. Yep. And of course, that's going to tell us whether or not inflation is coming down to, say, 4% as forecast by the end of the year.
Good stuff. Yep.
Or it's going to be a bit sticky.